The ancient Egyptians buried their dead here in the west bank of Luxor, in this remote place, because of one reason. That pyramid behind me, the mountain that is topped out with a pyramidal shape. The ancient Egyptians of the New Kingdom were buried here, the kings of 18th, 19th and 20th dynasties. They wanted to imitate their ancestors who built the pyramids of Giza almost 1,500 years earlier, since the pyramidal shape refers to the cult of the sun. King Seti II ruled Egypt in the 19th dynasty. That's when the pharaohs gave up the idea of hiding the entrances of their tombs after most of their ancestors' tombs in the Valley of the Kings were robbed. They also cared about decorating the entrances with colored reliefs. Naturally, the work in the tomb would start in the front and go deeper step by step. So if the king died suddenly, the front parts of the tombs would be the only ones finished, and that's exactly what happened here. Seti II is dressed in his royal outfit and crowns and faces the Lord of the Dead, God Osiris. He greets him with a statue of Ma'at, the goddess of justice, asking him for a fair judgment in the netherworld, the world of afterlife. Then we find the three symbols of the sun in its daily life circle, right behind that scene. So, the scarab is a sun in the morning, the circle is a sun at noon, then God Atum is a night that closes the life circle. Karnak Temple is the biggest religious building in the whole world, not just in Egypt. It's built over almost 200 acres of land, over 2,000 years of time. The pharaohs of Egypt came here one after another to build us great constructions there, ending up by the first pylon built by King Necta Nebo. So, when you come to visit Egypt and when you enter Luxor Temple and Karnak temples, you're going to compare between all the monuments of the world and the monuments especially here in Luxor, because it's a very specific city, it's a very nice city to be visited. The colonnade of Karnak Temple is the biggest in the world and the greatest building ever constructed for a religious purpose. It's 52 meters in length and 103 meters wide, which means that, if compared to other relative buildings, it's 7,000 square feet less than Westminster Cathedral and 10,000 square feet smaller than the Notre Dame of Paris. The colonnade is associated with massive, astonishingly miraculous numbers in the world of constructions, for it comprises 134 giant sandstone columns divided into two sections. The first one is in the middle, where two main rows of papyrus columns, 22.4 meters high, bear apexes, which by turn bear the massive blocks of the ceiling. The diameter of each reaches 3.5 meters, and its perimeter is more than 10 meters. The height of just the capital is 3.5 meters, and its diameter at the top is 5.5 meters. These two rows were constructed by King Amun-Hotep III, who had built the third pylon of the temple at the rear of the colonnade. King Seti I constructed the rest of the columns in the colonnade. That's not a statement to be taken lightly when we know that they are 122 in number. They are built in 14 rows, 7 on each side of the hall. The height of each column is 14.74 meters, with a diameter of 8 meters, matching the 8 meters difference in height between the side columns and the two rows in the middle. This gap was occupied by windows made of stone, in a highly elegant shape. Cleopatra VII is the Egyptian queen who ruled Egypt as a last descendant of her Macedonian Greek family from 51 till 30 BC. She stood out amongst the preceding 6 Cleopatras due to her amazing characteristics and the circumstances that existed in Egypt and in the Greek palace at her time. To understand clearly this part of the Egyptian history, we have to go back in time 300 years and watch Alexander the Great's advent to Egypt with his boats and troops and setting his foot on the Egyptian soil on what was to become later the city of Alexandria and the ruling base of the Greeks, where the kings and queens lived bearing one title, the Ptolemies. After the defeat of the king of Persia in Assos in 333 BC, and to protect himself from the danger of the powerful Persian fleet in the Mediterranean, Alexander the Great initiated the invasion of all the marine ports in Syria and Palestine, then invaded Egypt, which fell without a fight when Mazazes, the Persian wali, surrendered Memphis fortress with its garrison and safe. Alexander was actually welcomed by the Egyptians with joy, as they regarded him the liberator from the cruel Persian rule. The Egyptian priests in Memphis acknowledged the Macedonian invader as a king over Egypt. Special rituals were performed in the temple of God Ptah, where Alexander presented offerings to him and other gods, as he knew that nothing has upset the Egyptians like the killing of Ochos to the Abyss bull and the disrespect which Cambyses showed towards him. In fact, the respect which Alexander has shown towards the Egyptian gods and the offerings he presented were not fake ways to reach out to them, but that tendency was a real distinctive characteristic of that great leader. In the first middle of 331 BC, and after Alexander established the city of Alexandria, he headed towards Siwa. That visit wasn't only the most famous visit in the ancient history, but beyond doubt it was a main event that immortalized the name of Siwa Oasis in both the ancient and modern times. Luxor Temple is a very important and major temple visited by tourists in Luxor city, together with the great Grand Karnak Temple. This season, the temple is totally packed with tourists coming from all over the world to visit the temple that was built by 2 pharaohs, King Ramesses II and King Amun-Hotep III. King Amun-Hotep III ordered the construction of Luxor Temple for the triad gods of Thebes on the location of the ruins of the Middle Kingdom Temple in 1360 BC. There were 2 reasons behind his order, the first of which is to reassure his kinship to God Amun himself, as his rights to sit on the throne were incomplete, when the royal Egyptian tradition stated that the pharaoh had to be a son of a king and a queen, or married to a princess of pure royal blood. Neither conditions applied on Amun-Hotep III, having a foreign mother and a wife from the common people called Ti. After the death of his father, he consulted with the priests of God Amun to legalize his claim of the throne by relating himself directly to God Amun as a son. They came up with a story similar to the story of the divine birth of Queen Hatshepsut and recorded it on the walls of the birth chapel in Luxor Temple. The story simply says that God Amun revealed himself to Amun-Hotep's mother, Mutim Uya, as a human in the image of her husband Thutmose IV. So she had a relation with him and gave birth to a male, whom he called Amun-Hotep, which means God Amun is content. This story proves that his road to the throne wasn't smoothly paved, and it gave him a priority and advantage to all the previous pharaohs, for he is a direct descendant from Amun himself. This leads to the second purpose of building the temple, which is satisfying the priests of Amun and expanding their power by building a great temple for Amun. New Alamein is a promising extension of El Alamein city, located in the north coast of Egypt. It's famous for its towering buildings, compounds and apartments, all located by its beautiful blue coral waters by its beaches. Egypt constructional plans are extending all over Egypt, including its western part, where Alamein offers vacationers unforgettable beautiful times. The city of New Alamein is the first grand city in the north coast and is considered one of the cities of the fourth generation. It can be considered similar to the new administration capital in Cairo, in sharing the giant scales of constructions and the grand international projects that are being built in it, making Alamein one of the best touristic cities in Egypt. The project of New Alamein city is one of the solutions to overcome the population problem by using the north coast a residential place, in addition to being a touristic attraction throughout the whole year. The area of Alamein city reaches 48,000 acres of land with a depth of more than 60 kilometers south to the coastal line. The plan of the city is to absorb housing more than 3 million persons. The city's project is divided into several levels, the first of which is divided to two main sections that reach 8,000 acres. It will house 400,000. The first phase is composed of a coastal section that's also divided into an international touristic center and another archaeological and a civil center. New Alamein is a city that has grand international malls and residential and administration and touristic places. There are towers that rise to a grand height, symbolizing the Egyptian ambition of expansion that knows no limit. King Ramesses III owns a complete temple inside the constructions of Karnak temples. This temple was used during the daily life of the king, unlike the other temples in the West Bank, which were called memorial temples. Here the king owns 3 sanctuaries inside. The one in the middle belonged to god Amun, the one on the right side belonged to his wife goddess Mut, and the one on the left side belongs to his son god Khonsu, the god of the moon. King Ramesses III entered the pages of history for being the last mighty king in ancient Egypt during the New Kingdom. For in his time, Egypt had witnessed important military victories as well as remarkable constructional and artistic renaissance that happened between 1184 and 1153 BC. The king's birth name is Ramessoheka-Iyun, which means the one born by Ra, ruler of Iyun, which is Thebes. His coronation name is Wesermite Ra Meri Amun, which means strong is the justice of Ra, the one beloved by Amun. By the end of the 19th dynasty, many foreigners and mercenaries penetrated and spread in the country, setting their eyes on occupying Egypt. Thus, by the beginning of the 20th dynasty, Ramses III found himself facing the challenge, and courageously he stood for it in the 5th year of his reign, and fought the Libyans and their allies of the Indo-Europeans and knocked them down in the west of the Delta. The news of this battle was recorded on the walls of his temple in Habu. Amongst the most important battles which the Egyptian army fought in the reign of King Ramses III is the one he fought in the 8th year of his reign against the Sea people. They were the Sicilians, the Belest, who are the origins of the Palestinians, and the Chardans of Sardinia, and Mashawash, and others. These people invaded Khita of the Hittites and occupied some of the Mediterranean islands and some of the cities by the Forat River, then headed to Egypt with a navy and an on-land army, and reached the mouth of the Nile.
In 1945, the brilliant Egyptian architect Hassan Fathi constructed a marvelous collection here in El Korana village in the west bank of Luxor to serve the community which lives here. But by time, this collection needed major restoration and rehabilitation projects.
Appraising the intellectual contributions of Hassan Fathi in the field of architecture is not an easy task. Perhaps his most significant legacy will be the humanism that he championed and the boost he gave to the self-image of architecture in the Third World generally, the Muslim world specifically, and in Egypt in particular. He elucidated his positions over the years with a remarkable clarity and courage and consistency. Another element of the paradigm that Fathi erected step by step was the participatory nature of the design process. He encouraged self-help and promoted user participation in design. In some instances, he allowed the peasants to express their wishes for the layouts of their homes. In other instances, he let the peasants use a courtyard for a number of days and then establish the layout of the courtyard on the basis of their use, defining the pathways where the earth had been beaten by the steps. All these efforts are examples of Fathi's persistent attempts to introduce further individualization in the design process. This could be noticed in the village of New Gorna, which was partially built between 1945 and 1948. It's possibly the most well-known of all of Fathi's projects because of the international popularity of his book, The Architecture for the Poor, which was published nearly 20 years after the experience and concentrating on the tragic history of this single village. The architect's explanations offered in the book are extremely compelling and ultimately persuasive. New Gorna is still most significant for the questions it raises rather than the problems it tries to solve, and these questions still await objective analysis.